Indeed. We got the transcript for today. So, chat, I'm going to give a read-in. I might have to go get my dog. One of them are barking a little bit too much. They got to calm it down. Calm it the hell down. I don't know what they're barking about like that. But I'm going to read verbatim what was said in opening statements. Okay? You ready for this? This is opening statements. Okay? Opening statements. Okay. Here we go. So they start with a bunch of stuff. Let's get to opening statements. The jury's not in. Okay, so they talk about a bunch of stuff before the jury gets in. And this is opening statements. Y'all ready? This is for the prosecution. Okay, I'm going to read it like I'm in court. Good morning, y'all. This case is about revenge, stalking, and premeditated murder. This is the case about the death of a 24-year-old Savia Robinson at the hands of these defendants and their co-conspirators. And on a summer day in August 22nd, Savia Robinson and some friends, including the rapper Taekwon Bowman, who you will hear being referred to throughout this trial by his nickname, Quando Rondo. It's going to be a name you hear throughout this trial a lot. They were visiting Los Angeles. What you will learn in this trial is that Quando Rondo was a rival of Durk Banks, who's also known by Lil Durk. What Quando Rondo and Savia Robinson didn't know was that they were being followed, that these defendants, these guys here, and their co-conspirators, they had flown across the country to track, stalk, hunt, and kill Quando Rondo. What Savia Robinson didn't know, what Quando didn't know, is that that day would be Savia Robinson's last day on earth. As Savia and Quando left their hotel, you will hear the defendants and the co-conspirators who had flown in the day before stalked them using 2 cars. Stalked them while they slept, stalked them while they shopped, and for 2 days tracked and stalked them while they drove around Los Angeles in that black Escalade, waiting for their opportunity to ambush. And you will hear when Quando and Savia were at their most vulnerable at a gas station around 5:30 p.m. on a Friday during rush hour at a busy gas station across from the Beverly Center. The co-conspirators, they decided it was time to strike. 3 mass shooters came down an alley, including defendant Lindsay in the front, who you will learn was the man circled in red right there. They unloaded their firearms towards the car, striking and killing Savia Robinson. You will learn as the shooters, including defendant Lindsay, fled the scene. Defendant Wilson was right around the corner in a getaway car. Oh, wow. By the way, let me just stop here. So apparently there's one shooter that never told. It's Lindsay. So it's 3 people on trial. Banks, Durk, Wilson, Didi, Lindsay. 2 of the shooters are cooperating. 2 of the shooters are cooperating, chat. So 2 of the shooters are cooperating, and they're claiming Lindsay was in the front. You will learn as the shooters, including defendant Lindsay, fled the scene. Wilson was right around the corner in a getaway car. Defendant Banks was sitting by the phone waiting for an update from his guys if his hitman got their guy and killed Quando Rondo. What the shooters and the co-conspirators left behind was dead body, 18 rounds, including multiple expelled from a machine gun. But the question is, why did this happen? For what reason did this occur? Why did the Savia Robinson die on that summer day? You know what the answer is, y'all? Revenge. This is a story of revenge. And in order for y'all to understand the story of revenge, I'm going to introduce a couple key individuals that you will learn about throughout this whole trial. Check this out. There's a couple different names. I'll go through them. But they're important to understand the story of revenge, the story of years-long campaign of stalking, and of course, culminated in Savia's death. So let's start with the defendant, Durk Banks. Defendant Durk Banks, he's known as Smirky-O, Lil Durk. He's a prominent musician. He was a member of a group called, he formed the group. It was called OTF, Only the Family. You're gonna hear throughout this trial, OTF. But this trial, this case, is not about music. This is about murder. You're going to hear that on one part, OTF was music. Some of his members made music, but a subgroup of OTF were members of some of the same Chicago gangs and formed bonds. They got to know each other that way. And I want to talk to him about an individual. He's central to the story. His name is Davon Bennett. I'm gonna refer to him as King Von. And that's how you're gonna hear his name being referred to throughout the trial. Now, King Von, he's a prominent member of that Chicago gang. You're gonna learn that defendant Banks, Smirkio, defendant Wilson, oh, that's Didi, and other co-conspirators were part of that gang. In addition to being a prominent member, King Von was also a member, what I tell y'all? OTF. You can see his chain right there. OTF. He was a very close friend of defendant Banks. And that's where our story of revenge starts. In November 2020, Quando Rondo and King Von got in an altercation. A member of Quando Rondo entourage shot and killed King Von. So as of November 2020, King Von was dead. And as I said before, King Von was a prominent member of OTF and a close friend of Smirkio. Well, what followed next was defendant Banks became consumed with revenge. You're going to hear a couple of different words for revenge in this trial. You're going to hear the term get back or getting back. You're also going to hear the term slide, which means for someone, which you learn is slang, someone seeking revenge or getting back. And a term that you're going to hear a lot is slide for Von. Get revenge. Get back for Von. And you're going to hear that in public and private, defendant Banks expressed his desire to get back for revenge and to his fellow OTF members. And at that time, the same time, he was receiving pressure from his fans to slide for Von. So how did it work? How did OTF and the defendant Banks co-conspirators plan? How did they conspire to slide for Von, to get back, to seek revenge? How? Well, I want to introduce you to a couple other key players in the game, okay? You're going to hear about them. You're going to hear about them all over this trial. First, Casey Hester. He's also known as OTF Jam. OTF Jam grew up with Banks. You'll hear that King Von and Banks and Didi, OTF Jam was from the same gang. You'll hear that Durk kept OTF Jam close. You'll learn that OTF Jam is a cold-blooded killer. And of course, Durk knew that. You learned that defendant Banks kept OTF Jam in the fold. While OTF Jam was in prison for attempted murder, defendant Banks supported him financially by putting money on his books. When OTF Jam got out of prison, defendant Banks gave him more money to support him. OTF Jam was brought into the fold as a trusted member of OTF, but not because he was a talented rapper. It was because he was muscle. Because he could be easily deployed to do things like kill Quando Rondo, which is exactly what he did. Now, that might be a little Freudian slip or whatever, because he didn't kill Quando Rondo. Anyway, you will learn OTF Jam was one of the masked shooters I showed you before. You will see that he, along with Lindsay and another individual who we'll learn about later, they were one of those men who unloaded their firearm to kill Quando. They flew across the country to kill Quando. Now, OTF Jam has pled guilty to this murder. He's pled guilty. I told y'all this. He pled guilty. He's agreed to cooperate with the government, and so you will hear from him on the stand. You will learn how he was deployed as a hitman by Smirkio and the OTF co-conspirators to go get Quando in LA. Then there's defendant Wilson. Didi, what up, nigga? He's also known as OTF Didi. He calls himself the Threat or Big Threat. By the way, here's a photo of him on Instagram. He calls himself the Threat. You will learn that defendant Wilson, Didi, was also a trusted member of OTF and associate of Durk Banks. You'll learn about his role in the murder, and not only did he fly out to kill Quando Rondo, that he recruited two of the hitmen. He recruited them. Okay? Including his associate defendant, Lindsay. So remember Lindsay, who didn't tell? So he's saying the other person, the third person who's on the stand, got recruited by D. You will see text messages showing that recruitment, and you will hear that OTF Didi that defendant Wilson was in one of the stalking cars helping coordinate where Quando Rondo was. Then he helped allow the shooters to get away. Then there is Kevon Grant. Man. You learned that Kevon Grant was defendant Banks' right-hand man, like his personal assistant. You'll hear the things he did for defendant Banks, like go shopping for him, help him book transportation, drive him around. But just like OTF that had a criminal side, so did Kevon Grant. Okay? You will learn Kevon Grant was part of a stolen car ring, and one of his main jobs was to procure stolen cars and stolen guns. And that's exactly what he did in this damn murder. You will learn that defendant Banks, at his direction, Kevon Grant procured the stolen cars and guns to be used in this murder, and he tried to kill Quando. And that happened to kill Savia Robinson. And just like OTF Jam, Kevon has pled guilty to this murder. You will hear from him because he's agreed to cooperate with the government. He'll tell you about flying across the country in a private jet with defendant Banks. As the troop mobilized, as flights were booked for the co-conspirators to fly out and kill Quando Rondo, as I said before, Durk was consumed with getting revenge. Consumed with sliding for Vaughn. What you gonna hear is that he used his wealth and he used his pure strings to put pressure on the OTF conspirators to seek revenge. You will even see messages where he threatens to cut off his OTF members financially if they don't get revenge. You'll learn it wasn't just limited to Quando. Defendant Banks used his OTF members to hunt his rivals. You will see messages, for example, in his Instagram post that defendant Banks sent to another rival in Chicago. I got them hunting you. And that's exactly what he did to Quando Rondo. He had his guys, his OTF guys, hunting him up. So when the first opportunity struck, when the co-conspirators took action, you will hear that in May 2021, Quando Rondo hit a concert in rural Georgia, and defendant Banks and his co-conspirators decided it was time to take their shot at revenge. You'll hear that defendant Banks and Kevon Grant and other co-conspirators conspired to go shoot up Quando after the concert. And at the following concert at a gas station in a city called Blackshear, Georgia, the co-conspirators took their first shot. They fired multiple rounds at Quando's car, but they missed. You'll also see that defendant Banks was tracking just that. In one of his phones, you're going to see images that Quando Rondo had a show in rural Georgia. The news alert right after showing that he was shot. Let's fast forward to then August 2022. Opportunity strikes again. Defendant Banks, his co-conspirators, learned that Quando Rondo was in LA, and they determined again that it was time to get back. They're gonna strike in LA. While Quando is vulnerable, he's a fish out of water in a city that's not his. So what the co-conspirators do? Okay, you will learn that defendant Banks and Kevon Grant, his personal assistant, are flying back from Miami on a private jet. PJ. Jet set. Defendant Schmerkio mobilizes troops. You'll hear that around that time in the morning of August 18th, the flights are starting to get booked for the OTF members and the other hitmen to fly from Chicago to Los Angeles, and you will hear that defendant Banks tried to distance himself. Here's a text message where he says, "Don't book no flights under my name involved with me," as the flights are being booked for these co-conspirators from Chicago to LA. You'll also learn that this is not the only time that defendant Banks tried to distance himself and evade law enforcement and hide his criminality. For example, you're going to see threads in defendant Banks' own words where he says, "Delete the thread and start a new one." You will learn that the co-conspirators use other methods to attempt to avoid law enforcement, like encrypted communications. So let's go back to August 2022. Right? As the troops are mobilized and people are trying to fly in, not to Los Angeles. Again, remember, they try to avoid law enforcement, so they flew into San Diego, which is about an hour away. Quando Rondo is not in San Diego, he's actually in LA. So you will learn that the co-conspirators start flying in. There's OTF Jam in the red shoes right there, okay? The same red shoes is used during the murder. Another co-conspirator next to him is in the green shirt, who you will learn about, who is one of the drivers of the stalking car. And as I mentioned before, defendant Wilson starts recruiting. He recruits two of his associates, a man named Keith Jones and defendant Lindsay, to come out and seek a reward for killing Quando Rondo. A reward for defendant Banks, from defendant Banks for killing Quando Rondo. And what you learn and hear is that the two men flew out with a promise that they were going to be paid. As I said, this is a case about revenge, but you will also learn it's about a case about reward. Because what you'll hear is that defendant Lindsay and Keith Jones had nothing to do with Quando Rondo. This was not their beef. This is Smirkio's beef. This is Dee Dee's beef. This is OTM Jam's beef. But for those other guys, it's not their beef. They're friends of Wilson. Wilson recruited them. They're from a different neighborhood in Chicago. They got nothing to do with Vaughn. They flew out because they were promised money from Durk to get Quando Rondo. Keith Jones is the third shooter. Okay? Another one of those masked men I showed you earlier. Right? By the way, they just mentioned it right here, I think. Yeah, Keith Jones. And you will learn. So we have Lindsay, first shooter. Keith Jones, OTF Jam. Alright? And you will learn that he also pled guilty to this murder. So Keith Jones is a cooperator too. So we have two shooters. There was three shooters who did the killing. Two of them are cooperating. This is going to be tough for Durk, chat. Hey, Drill. This needs to be its own video. Like, the opening statement for the prosecutor, I'm reading it line by line. This is everything said to court. So make this his own video. Okay. Cool. All right. And he has agreed to cooperate with the government. So Keith Jones is cooperating. OTF Jam is cooperating. And Kevon Grant is cooperating. Okay. And you will hear from him about on the morning of August 18th, while he was sitting at home in Chicago, he got a call from defendant Wilson. Dee Dee called him and said, yo, come to LA to go get some money. This money is going to be for the murder of Quando Rondo. And that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. You learn about the frantic nature of that morning. Everybody learned that they had got their guy, that Quando was vulnerable, that he was in LA. And you will see that the co-conspirators flew out with just the shirts on their back because they're going for one purpose. So no luggage, no carry-on, no nothing. They're coming just to kill Quando Rondo. Here is the surveillance footage from San Diego Airport, which shows Keith Jones, defendant Wilson, and Lindsay. And they're all there. You'll hear from the evening of the 18th to the afternoon of the 19th, over a 2-day span, co-conspirators tracked Quando, waiting for their opportunity to ambush. When they all came up from San Diego to Los Angeles, it was late at night, but they thought they would take their shot. You will hear that they went to Quando's hotel and they waited outside. They ain't see Quando. So what did they did, they went to a hotel to sleep. But you will learn that the hotel was paid for by Smirkio. Just like the flights, that was also paid for by Smirkio. In the morning of August 19th, after sleeping at the hotel, they woke up ready for action. They got in these two cars, heavily tinted, one which you learn was stolen. That was the hot car. They had a fake plate. Kevon Grant obtained in order to evade law enforcement. And that from around early in the morning until 5:30 in the afternoon, they followed and followed, and they waited for their opportunity to kill. You're gonna see a lot of surveillance footage, and I'm just giving you a sampling right here. Here, Quando Rondo, Savia Robinson, they're in that black Escalade. The two are in a vehicle that's tinted, but one stolen car is following them from the hotel. Okay, and it's following them to a dispensary, to a clothing store, followed, waiting, in line and wait. Here, Quando and Savia is entering the clothing store in West Hollywood, the co-conspirators circling the block, waiting. When they pull up to the gas station, stolen car, they pulled up into the alley behind, so the shooters popped out and unloaded. Here's a video. It don't got no sound. Yup, 5:30 p.m. on a Friday outside of Beverly Center. Here's another angle if you missed that first one. You'll learn that Savia Robinson and Quando were They were in the back of that black Escalade, and the shooters were going to come around the corner. 18 bullets, y'all. And as I mentioned before, as the shooters fled, defendant Wilson was waiting around the corner to get away. And then, shortly after the murder, the shooters and the co-conspirators decided to get out of Dodge and go back to Chirac. But not before grabbing a bite to eat. You can't live California without living In-N-Out, you know? Here's the surveillance footage from In-N-Out. It's OTF Jam. You know, he a little fat, so he had to get a double-double. Defendant Wilson, Lindsay, and even Keith Jones. Yup, that's OTF Didi. Yup, that's Defendant Wilson. You'll see comparisons of the surveillance footage. Defendant Lindsay is in the In-N-Out wearing the same shoes that he wore early in the day. He changed his clothes, he changed them shoes. Same with OTF Jam. He was wearing the same red shoes, and Keith Jones wore them same gray shoes. So the co-conspirators had their flights paid for. It got booked home. It was paid for again by Smirkio. They celebrated and had a bite to eat. You will hear that following the death of Lil Pop, this is a picture of them headed back from the airport. Shirts on their back. Defendant Lindsay, Keith Jones, Wilson, OTF Jam, and the driver leaving LA. You will hear that after the murder, Banks and his co-conspirators celebrated, mocked, and taunted the death of Lil Pop and the attempted murder of Rondo. In memes, in private, they celebrated because they got some get back. But while the co-conspirators were stalking Quando, were tracking him, they were also being tracked because it turns out one of the cars, not the stolen one, the BMW, the other white car, had a GPS on it, and law enforcement was able to track that car everywhere it went. What you're gonna learn is that the car that was driven by Kevon Grant, Defendant Banks' personal assistant, and that car repeatedly went back and forth to a rental house where Smirkio was laying his head. Remember I told you that OTF Vonnie and Smirkio flew back on the morning of August 18th, the same day the shooters came in from Miami on a private jet, and you will hear that OTF Vonnie and that BMW went back and forth to this house, including after they missed their opportunity to get Quando on the 18th. Yes, you hear that in addition to the GPS data, you're going to see some cell site location data showing the approximate location of all the co-conspirators who participated in the on-the-ground stalking. And you'll see that Didi, Lindsay, their phones were always traveling. We got the GPS on y'all. Following Quando with OTF Jam, with Kevon Grant, all throughout Los Angeles, from downtown all the way to the Beverly Center, and then they went to In-N-Out. But yeah, the story don't end with murder. Savias Robinson, the murder of Savia Robinson, because at some point, Smirkio and his co-conspirators felt the walls were closing in. You're gonna see some messages from Smirkio talking to his co-conspirators, including Didi, with suspicion that Jam was cooperating. Oh, so Durk knew. This is in August 2023. By the way, chat. Akademiks interview with Lil Durk. When was that? No, that's not the right date. No, I gotta look it on Spotify. Yeah. It's on Spotify. Oh, we did it in May. Okay, good. May. You see, May. So it appears that between my interview with Durk and the next couple months, he knew one of his guys was snitching. Okay, it was in August. This is Smirkio saying, Jam, just get ready to snitch, blood. Clear as day. He gonna tell soon. And then he doubles down by saying, as long as we don't break, Jam could tell him whatever. That's Smirkio's own words. And what you will hear is that, as I said before, you will learn is that he was right. Smirkio was right. OTF Jam was in fact cooperating with the government, and you are going to hear from him today about his relationship with Smirkio, with Didi, and his role in this murder. So when the walls had closed in, you're going to hear that on October On an October morning in 2024, the FBI executed multiple search warrants at different co-conspirators' homes, and you will learn that just hours after that, the defendant Smirkio tried to flee the country. He tried to book multiple flights to get out of the Dodge. He tried to leave the United States. And when he saw that the FBI was at the private jet terminal, he fled from them and refused instructions to get out of the car. Smirk, get out of the car. He knew the walls had closed in. As you sit here and listen to this throughout this trial, the evidence is going to be clear. That those shooters that you saw, those men on the ground in those two cars that stalked and killed Savia Robinson, that Didi was in one car, and he helped the guys get away. He recruited people in that. Lindsay was the first guy who hopped out the car and rained bullets on Savia Robinson, aka Lil Pop, and Quando Rondo. That this murder occurred and that Savia Robinson died as a result of this conspiracy. But for what and why, it will be clear. It's all because of Smirkio's revenge. You're gonna see messages where defendant Smirkio says, we staying out of people's wars. They don't hop in ours. It's crazy. They don't slide or hurt motherfuckers. Leaving it all up to us. Leaving it all up to us. For their crimes, these defendants have been charged with 5 counts. Conspiracy, stalking resulting in death, murder for hire. After you've heard all the evidence, that's why, that for what? That motive is going to be clear. It was Smirkio's beef. It was Smirkio's money. It was Smirkio's hitman. It was Smirkio's get back. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Savia Robinson, aka Lil Pop, is dead. So, at the conclusion of this trial, after y'all have heard and seen and listened to all the evidence, and we'll have another opportunity to get up here again and speak to y'all, and at that time, we're going to ask that you just come to the only conclusion after seeing the evidence we're going to present. It's going to be that you find the most appropriate, and the only right thing to do is to find these defendants guilty of all counts. Holy. All right, that's the government right there.